Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Livin The Dream video podcast. I am Rishi Barran from the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. We have reached episode number 31. I'll call that the Derek McKee edition, former Seattle Supersonic. I wouldn't call him a great, but a better player than Rashaan Salam, who I could have gone with. We'll find out how much, Charlie knows his sports. He probably knows who they both are. But our guest today is Charlie Yaeger. He is the sports director at Lakeland PBS in Bemidji, Minnesota. Charlie, we appreciate you finding time to be with us today to chat about your life and career so far.
Of course, always love finding time for Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. I mean, you guys gave me so much that there isn't any amount of time I wouldn't give back, just as a repayment. But yeah, I don't know either of those guys. Like I know sports, but those were some pulls from a place that I'm not familiar with.
Oh, that's totally fine. One of them bombed out his NFL career after winning a Heisman Trophy. The other was kind of your guy who was he was solid, but probably could have been better than he was. But he was on some good teams. But we're glad you're on our team because the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting has put out a great number of graduates working in the industry. We're right around the 200 number now. We're closing in on that. Charlie has stood out since day one of his job. But Charlie, before we get to that, where did the dream of working as a sports broadcaster start for you?
Well, I think, I always loved sports. I grew up playing sports. I played every sport under the sun that I could get into. It was all year round. And my dad he had played, I don't want to say like he didn't play in the majors, but he played baseball professionally. He was in the minor leagues with the Yankees and stuff. And his uniform was still in his closet, and I would love, grabbing his hat and wearing it and stuff. And I absolutely loved sports, and he was always watching sports. And so I fell in love with sports, and I grew up playing sports and played football through college. And, it was one of those things where I was coaching college football after I got out of college. I coached for 10 years and I loved coaching. Coaching was so much fun, but it was just a part-time thing for me. I was working other full-time jobs outside of that. And it was somewhere in there that somebody said, "Hey, you've got a pretty good voice, you should think about doing, some maybe play-by-play or PA stuff or whatever." And at the college I went to, they were always looking for volunteers to help with PA announcing. So I started doing that. And I was like, I really enjoy this. This is fun. Like just yelling into a microphone during a basketball game or whatever, baseball game. And I was like, how do I keep doing this? And my buddy had me take over as the PA announcer for his high school baseball team. And I did all the walk-up songs for the kids, and everybody loved it. They thought it was the greatest thing ever. All the parents loved it, and tried to make it real professional. And I was like, God, I got to figure out how to do this for a living. I really do. And I had no idea where to begin, none whatsoever. And on my way to work every morning, I had to be to work by 6:30 a.m. On the West Coast. And every morning I would listen to Dan Patrick on my way to work. And one morning I heard him talking about the first graduating class from Full Sail University and this sportscasting thing that he was doing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That might be a good program to join, because like I could network through it and see if there's something available that maybe I could try to figure out how to work this into whatever. But I wasn't sold on it. Like I went and looked it up online, and I was like, I don't know, maybe it's just one of those money grab things or something. You're not sure because it's a new thing. And so I was like, all right, well, kind of put it on the back burner, kept doing PA stuff and all that. And then COVID hit, and I was like, hey, this is something that, I've been kind of teetering on. I'd had the call from some of the advisors from Full Sail, and they'd give me the rundown and all that stuff. And I was like, maybe I should go back to school. All I'm doing right now, football season's canceled. All I can do is go to work and come home, and then I sit around and watch Netflix. Like I could do something better with my time. Let's do it. And so I pulled the trigger. and said, I'm going to do it, and jumped right in. And of course, the first thing you do is not sportscasting. It's, I think it was just, it's similar to this. They ask about like, what's your dream job and stuff. And you talk about it and kind of get excited for the whole program, but you don't do sportscasting for a little while. But it was when I started doing Full Sail stuff, then I started looking around for, okay, what could I do for like play by play and stuff like that. And I started reaching out to, I was still doing PA for the like winter sports when the COVID stuff kind of cooled down and we could have people, they couldn't have fans at the games, but they still wanted a game experience for the kids. We were doing the testing and all that stuff, but I was like, what would be really cool is if we could do play by play for these games. Cause I'd be up in the booth, I'd be away from everybody, and like, let's figure this out. And so they did, and we kind of figured it out semi by the time the season was over. But the next year we got a new SID, and I was like, hey, I really want to do play by play, and I'm really getting into the sports casting thing. And that's absolutely where I fell in love with it. When I started doing the play by play stuff, I was like, okay, this is something that I really love. I love the preparation. I love watching the games because I love watching games anyway, and watching the game, talking during the game. The prep where I'm talking to the coaches and the players and learning all their stories, and I get to talk about their stories. And I always, would think back to listening to, because I was a Dodgers fan. So Vin Scully was, a guy that I'd always listened to. And I always admired the fact that he told stories. And it was somewhere in there, just my love for sports and my decision to, utilize my voice and do something that I truly enjoyed. Right. I mean, I was doing stuff that I enjoyed coaching too, but I didn't necessarily enjoy working at UPS or as a part-time employee at Boot Barn. Right. That was just a means to an end. That was just a job where I was, because I had to make money. And this is something now that I'm into it, I truly love.
I'm curious about the PA announcing. So what was your style like when you would introduce the players and get ready for the walk-up songs?
So I would always, I mean, I could give you a lowdown. We could just do it with a John Doe, maybe. So
Okay.
I would, I'd for the players, and I always tried to do it because I grew up, I don't know, his last name's Allen. Is it Rick Allen? Rich Allen?
Mel
He
Allen?
does what? Well,
Mel Allen?
he does the PA for, it's funny, he does the PA for the Vikings,
Oh yeah. Paul Allen.
Paul Allen. But I, growing up in Denver, he also does the PA for the Colorado Rockies
Hmm.
and the Colorado Avalanche. So he always had a great voice, and he came into it, now batting number 25, John Doe. And that's what I took, and that's what I did. So I would, get the music kind of going, and just how can I, deep voice and really just say it out and try to make it sound as professional as possible. Like if they were in a big league stadium, because a lot of those kids, they may never play high school ball or anything after high school ball. And in college, none of those kids will play anything after college. We're D3 university. And so anything to make that experience better for them was something that I wanted to do. And I had fun doing it, and some people might have thought that it maybe sounds silly or whatever, but I just leaned into it and I said, I'm going to go for it. Growing up as a kid, I did do drama club. Even though I was doing sports, I did drama club too. I did choir. I did things like that. I have no problem performing. That was never anything that I had an issue with. So I just kind of leaned into doing that piece of it. And that was how I did the PA. It just kind of jumped right in and said, let's go.
It was cool to hear you do that. We have a student, his name is JP. He's a campus student. He's going to be graduating pretty soon. And he always talks to me about a guy named Paul Porter who does the Orlando Magic and the Tampa Bay Lightning. So shout out to JP. You get a new public address announcer today. But you are Charlie Yaeger the fourth. So you mentioned your father earlier. I'm guessing he's Charlie Yaeger the third. What is the significance of passing down the family name to you?
I'm not sure necessarily. I mean, just the fact that they started passing it down. My great grandfather I was lucky enough to know him when I was younger. We lived in Arizona, and he was living in Arizona with my great grandmother, and spent time with him. And there's a picture somewhere actually of all four of us. It was crazy that we were able to get that in. It was pretty cool. But they just named my grandfather the, Junior, Charles Joseph Yaeger Jr. And he actually went by Joe. Nobody, everybody called him by his middle name. And then my dad, they just decided, hey, we're going to keep doing this. And they went for the third, and they called my dad Chuck. So he goes by Chuck. And then my great grandfather went by Charles. And so my mom's like, that's fine. We'll name him, we'll continue it. We'll go the fourth, and we'll call him Charlie, because she really liked the name Charlie. Um, so that's how I got my name, and just running with it.
That's pretty special. And you've done a lot with that name to make yourself known, not just as a broadcaster. You mentioned your athletic career growing up, and that really started to get concentrated on football in Redlands. And then you went to the University of Redlands, close by. What was the football portion of your life like?
So it's funny, actually. I wanted to play football growing up. And a lot of my friends were playing it. So I lived in Denver through elementary school. It's right to the start of middle school. And my parents wouldn't let me play football at that age. And part of it was my mom was, worried about my health and well-being. I was playing other sports too. I was playing basketball, I was playing baseball, I was playing soccer. So I begged to play hockey. Didn't get to play hockey, even though we were living in Denver. Avs were winning Stanley Cups. I wanted to play hockey so badly, didn't get to play hockey. But football was another one that my mom said, when you're in middle school, that's when I'll let you play. That's when I'll let you play Pop Warner or whatever. And we moved to Mission Viejo in Orange County, and that's when they were like, okay, you're in sixth grade, seventh grade, going to seventh grade. You can play football. But I only got 1 year of football because they have weight limits for football, for kids. You have to make weight in Pop Warner. And, I was a big kid. I'm 6'4" now, and I was a big kid then. So I was just making weight in seventh grade, and I played that year, and I was I'll just put it this way. I was not very good. Right. And part of it was I'd never played before, and I was just kind of learning, and I didn't really understand the mechanics of the game. I know, like, I've watched the game. I just didn't, playing it's different than, and I was an offensive lineman. An offensive line is a completely different beast than running around and catching a ball or throwing the ball. It requires technique that you don't use in any other sport. Every other sport that I played, it's all passing, throwing, shooting, whatever. And this was just not, I hadn't done it before. So there was a tough, steep learning curve. And then in eighth grade, I didn't play because I wasn't going to make weight. But the high school I was going to, Mission Viejo High School in Mission Viejo, at the time, they were a powerhouse school. Same school Mark Sanchez went to. And he was the quarterback. He was a senior my freshman year. But junior year, before that, they'd won a couple of they didn't have state titles at the time, but they'd won a couple of the CIF is what they'd call it. So that was like the most you could win your section, pretty much. And so they had won a couple of those in a row. And they were starting to play teams from around the area. In fact, from my freshman to senior year, we played De La Salle, which was that school that had 100 and some odd wins in a row. I don't remember. They were from Northern California. Everybody wanted to play them and try and beat them and stuff. And so we were scheduling teams like that. We were trying to play whoever we could. And I was like, I want to play, they got a really good football team. Like, I want to play on that team. I want to play. So the next year as a freshman, I came in and I decided, I was just going to go as hard as I could every single play, which stood out to the coaches somewhat, but still lacking a lot of technique. So I ended up on the B team instead of the freshman A team. But by the end of the season, using my size and other stuff, I'd kind of learned some things. I moved my way up, and then, played sophomore football, and then finally got to the varsity. And between my sophomore and senior year, I grew like 6 inches. I went from 5'10"
Wow.
to 6'4", and all of a sudden, all the coaches are like, "Oh, who's that guy? Where's right?" And so that's when I really started to kind of come into my own. But I was still I would argue that I still was kind of like a young colt trying to learn how to play the game, and there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't quite figured out yet. So I wasn't again the best football player, but I was, you know, getting the job done, and but my coach recognized one of the things that I always continued to do was just work as hard as I could. Day in and day out, I would grind it, just in the weight room, on the field. I was making mistakes, but that was okay. It was just I was grinding. And at the end of the season, the coach came to me. He said, "Look," he goes, I think you have not reached your full potential yet. You're big enough to play at a D1 school, but you're not talented enough to. But there's a lot of Division II, Division III schools out there that you could probably play at. And if you continue to work as hard as you're doing, you're going to come into your own once you kind of grow into yourself, your body, and everything else. He goes, and I think that those would be really good places for you. And that's how I ended up at Redlands. Is they recruited me and showed me a lot of love, and they were like, "Hey, you played pretty high standard of football at a powerhouse school in California, and so we really would, we think that you would fit here well and that you would do well early on." And turns out I did, and kind of got there my freshman year, got a little more playing time, and one of those, like, you have those aha moments, and that kind of switch just flips in your head, and all of a sudden I figured it out, how to be an offensive lineman and how to play football well, and started from my sophomore to senior year, um, before injuring myself in a celebration accident. But those things happen, it is what it is. You get excited sometimes, and sometimes you don't expect things to happen, but they do. And that ended my football career. But hey, I wouldn't change a second of any of the stuff that happened to me during football for anything, because it's how I got here.
That's Charlie Yaeger. He's the sports director at Lakeland PBS TV in Bemidji, Minnesota. Charlie, I also played a lot of sports growing up, different types of things. And when people ask me, well, what one did you get the most out of? I would say football. It teaches you so many life lessons. You kind of went through a process of a lot of different things that you took out of it. But how did playing football prepare you for the rest of your life, and specifically for this industry?
Well, I think the thing that I got out of it the most was learning to grind. My freshman year, I had an offensive line coach. He's actually right now he's the O-line coach for the New York Jets. He was the O-line coach for the Tennessee Titans. We knew he was not long for Division III. That was like his jumping off point. And on the field, you absolutely hated the guy because he pushed you so hard. I've never had somebody push me so hard in my entire life. His name's Keith Carter, and uh, he would just MF you all the time, all over the place, and you hated it, but you respected it because you knew what he was telling you was the truth. He was being honest with you. He was giving you feedback all the time, but he always told us from day one, you have to love the grind. You can't be an offensive lineman unless you love the grind. If you don't love the grind, then get out of here, because it's not going to work. You have to love the grind. You have to love those days when things aren't going to go your way and you just have to figure out how to get through it. And all he was going to require is that you get through the grind, you continue to improve yourself, and he shouldn't have to coach you on effort. Effort's something that you have to decide to do. And then also our team motto in college was mental toughness, extreme desire. We had mental toughness and you had extreme desire, and those things were, you just had to be mentally tough enough to get through what, like, nothing was going to distract you or stop you from what you wanted to do. And same thing with extreme desire. I'm going to do it until I achieve my goal. There's no other options. Right. And those are things that I really took into the workforce. I bought into heavily. And this job, I have found out that you really have to have those things if you want to be successful, because and you have to be disciplined enough to teach yourself those things. That's something else football teaches you too, is discipline. And you have to be disciplined, because unlike some of the other jobs that I've had, I've found out in this job that it's very much you having to make the decisions and you having to go with them, but also you having to have the wherewithal to make sure that you're prepared constantly, because there's nobody sitting behind you saying, well, you're not prepared enough, or what's on the docket today or whatever, because everybody else is doing their own thing. And you have to be organized and disciplined, and you have to figure out how to grind through things. And sometimes, in order to get a bunch, to fill your broadcast for the day, you got to get up at 7 a.m. and you got to be out all day shooting stuff and putting it all together for a 10 o'clock show. And it's a long day. And sometimes you got to drive really far to cover a game, and it's going to be a long day. And sometimes you got to give up weekends, but you just learn to grind. And I think that has served me incredibly well when I first got into this job.
Well, after your Bill Grammatical like accident in the celebration, that challenge opened a new door for you and a new chance to put that grind in, and that was coaching. You coached at Redlands for 10 years. Share with us more on the coaching experience and what you got out of that.
So in coaching, that was where I really learned kind of how to talk to people, how to manage people, which I ended up utilizing for a job that I had later down the road. But it was tough at first because I started coaching immediately after I finished playing. And so a lot of those guys are guys that I played with. Right. And so that can be tough at times because I'm friends with a lot of them. I hung out with them in college. And if we've all hung out in college, we know what hanging out in college is like. So now all of a sudden, there's a different dynamic where I'm a coach and they're the player, and you have to earn respect in a different way. And I fell on my face a couple of times. I mean, the first year I was an assistant coach. And so I had my offensive line coach, there to protect me. I was just helping with drills and stuff. I didn't have to run meetings. But the second year I was the tight ends coach. And all those guys are like, well, you were an offensive lineman. What do you know about running routes or doing any of that stuff? So that was difficult too, because it's like now there's a challenge on my knowledge of the game, and rightly so, because there was still stuff that I was learning. I was learning it along, and then I had to turn around and teach it. And I don't want to say fake it till you make it, because you don't want to fake anything, but I had to learn in that time to be able to tell people I didn't know something, right? I couldn't just go out and fake like I did, and then the player runs the wrong route after I told them, oh yeah, that's it. And then the coach, our offensive coordinator yells at him, well, why are you doing that? Well, Charlie said this. And now all of a sudden that hurts my credibility. So I had to learn how to be able to say, I don't know, and then ask those questions, and then get help from other people that had been through that process. That was the first time I'd really kind of started to learn how to ask for help. And try to learn how to earn respect. That respect just wasn't going to be given because I had the title of coach. I had to earn it. And I also learned through that process of coaching that I don't necessarily have to be friends with the players either, right? That it needs to be, I just need to, and what I mean by that is not that I wouldn't want to be friends with them, but I had to be demanding of people. You have to be demanding in order for them to be better. If I don't demand enough of them, they're not going to get better. Just in the same way that I said that I had a coach that demanded a lot of me, and I absolutely hated him on the field, but I absolutely loved him as a coach, and I respected the hell out of him. And I realized that, okay, that's okay, that not everybody's going to like you, right? But if you demand enough of them, and if you're honest with them, and that if you treat them like man to man, right, and you treat them, you show them respect, you're going to get that respect in return. And I think that was an important part of my maturing process. Something that I definitely wasn't when I was in college or growing up. I was always the kid. I was taught, my parents did a great job of teaching me to look a person in the eye and shake their hand and say hello and introduce myself and all of those things. But I didn't understand really the respect dynamic until I got into coaching. And so I think I took that away, and also preparation, organizational stuff that continued to grow, and just learning how to talk to people and be in charge of people. So that all kind of came from coaching, and I owe a lot to coaching, and my head coach that taught me a lot as I was coaching. So his name's Mike Maynard, fantastic coach. And there's a lot of people that would back me up on that. 20 plus years worth of football players, and He had a lot of success there, and there was a reason. Is because he walked the walk every single day. He talked the talk, and he absolutely walked the walk. And I there's not a lot of people I admire more than him. So I was so thankful for his tutelage and learned so much as a coach there.
Now you're in your own leadership role as the sports director, and we'll get into more about that later. But we talk about reps on air, reps in editing, reps in shooting, whatever it is. Those were leadership reps as a coach. That experience that you received from that, how does that apply to you now to fine tune what you were doing before?
Well, certainly. So it's funny you bring up the reps, and this is something else that maybe I learned from coaching or being a player. Now that I'm reflecting on things and thinking about it, one of the things you do in football a lot is you watch film. You go to practice, you finish practice, you go back in and you watch film, because it there was a saying we had: it's never as bad as it seems, it's never as good as it seems, right? In person, you're watching it and you're saying, oh, that was, we had a pretty good practice today, or yeah, oh, we had a tough practice, it was a terrible practice, blah blah blah. And you go back and you watch the film and you pick up things and you realize things that you maybe didn't see in person. And that is something that I have brought with me to what I'm doing now, which is I watch film every night, as in I watch my own broadcast every single night after I get off the desk. During the broadcast, I know if I flub up a word or I mess something up, or maybe I got the video in last minute and there was a flash frame in one of the highlights or something, or a black frame or something, because you're rushing at the end and you got a deadline, you're trying to hit it, and you miss something or you misspell somebody's name in a lower third. And we have people to help check that, but at the end of the day, that's on me to make sure that those things are correct, and sometimes you don't. So I go back and I watch film and I say, okay, what did I miss today? So, and I jot down notes, and I treat it exactly like a film session, like football. And then I do the same thing with anything that any of the sports reporters that are doing stuff for me. I call him up after the show, because one of my sports reporters, he's 2 hours away from me, but I call him up after the show and I say, hey, that pack that you did tonight, I thought it was really good. Here are the things I really thought were good. Here's some of the stuff that I think you could probably work on or get better at. Or this is how we do things here, so make sure that we're doing this. And that all goes into that coaching style too, right? Is it's watching film. And so that has helped me tremendously, because I think sometimes you can get into a place where you just go out there and you do the job and you get through it, and then you're done and you go home and you just relax, and then you're like, oh, I'll just do it the next day. But how do you know to get better? How do you know what to hone in on to get better on, so that you can get better every day? And it's comes from that. It's the same reason when I visited right before graduation, I got to produce a show in the studio there, which was so much fun, because I as an online student, I never got to be in a studio, and that was the coolest thing ever. But afterwards, I asked how many of the students, how many of you were on the Dan Patrick feedback sessions, right? Some were like, oh, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't always have the time. And I was like, man, you should be at every single one. You really should, because that's film breakdown. That's where you learn things. And you don't just learn from what you do. Sometimes I'll swap highlights with other stations around here, because it's such a vast area to cover. We'll do that. And I'll go watch their broadcast. I'll watch how they performed something that I sent them, because I cut the highlight. That do they use the script that I had? Do they use how did they perform it? Did they do a better job than me? Did they not do as good a job as me? Right. And so I learned things from that too. And I'm constantly watching other people's stuff. So I think that was kind of another thing too that I pulled from that coaching and from playing and the football thing. I don't know if that answered the question. I went off on a tangent, but
No, it did. And you touched on something I did want to get to, and let's talk about it now, is you took full advantage of those Dan Patrick feedback sections, somebody that you listened to for years and years on the radio, and you had a chance to interact with him and show him your work. You still show up after graduation, right? We still see you jump on there. That's certainly an opportunity you don't get anywhere else besides our school. what did you do to take full advantage of that opportunity?
It did not matter what I had, whether it was an old thing or a new thing, I would send it in. And if you're waiting to try to, I'll tell you this, if you're waiting to try to put together the perfect package or the perfect stand up or whatever, so you can send it in and get praise, that's great. But I would regularly not send in my best. I would send in something that I thought was okay. And I'd be surprised. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, this is okay. And I think there was one that I did that you said, no, Charlie, I think this is like your best stand-up that you've done. I think this is your best one. And I thought it was average. I was like, oh, this one's okay. It's just whatever. And Gus agreed. He thought it was good. Dan thought it was good. And I was like, wow, it's sometimes you don't even realize because you're your harshest critic. But I would regularly send stuff in that did have issues, right? Because I wanted to hear, or I wanted the knowledge of, how do I fix that? How do I get better at that? And so if you go in, you also have to go in with the mindset of that it's okay to get critiqued. You cannot allow anything that anybody says to get you down. You have to understand that it's all to get you better. There was one that I did, it was a golf one, and I think it wasn't with Dan, it was with Vince, and who was the guy from the Golf Network? Khan, I think it was.
Yeah, Craig Can, yeah.
Craig Can. And they absolutely undressed me on this thing that I did. But that was okay. That was okay because I learned a lot from what they had to say and how to make it better. And I didn't make those mistakes again. Right. And I think that's all part of it is you have to take advantage of that. So I would always send it in. And even if I didn't have something, because I think the first one I got on, I didn't have any sportscasting stuff yet. And I just listened to what he said about other people's stuff so that I didn't make that same mistake. But what's funny, and I always think about it every time, is the first one that I did send in, I was urged to do it for my Sportscasting 101. It was my final. And I can still remember because I recorded it on this computer and it did not look professional at all. My hair was all shaggy and I was just wearing a plain t-shirt. I kind of look like I do now, I guess. But I didn't have any of the stuff on, and they didn't say anything to me about it then, but they told me, later, be a little more professional. But I still remember when I did my highlight, I treated my highlight like a play-by-play. And they said, you need to fix, don't just do the play-by-play. Don't just tell me what I'm seeing, right? Give me other stuff. Give me some substance, yada, yada, yada. And every time I would go on to a session after that, and I would watch somebody else do their first sportscasting one, as soon as I would go up, he's going to tell them, don't do play-by-play. And of course, without fail. So when you're doing the highlight, don't do play-by-play, right? And then the next time we go on, a couple months later, I'm sitting in the office telling my friend, hey, he's going to tell him, don't treat it like a play-by-play. All right. So for the highlights, you don't want to make it like a play-by-play. You hear it every time, right? But those things that got ingrained in me. So I don't treat my highlights like play-by-plays, right? And I've learned how to make my highlights fun and include other things like that. So you pick those things up by continuing to be on them, and they're easily the most important thing. One time I was on when I was in the football office, and one of our coaches was sitting behind me. He goes, "Who's that?" I go, "Oh, it's Dan Patrick." You're talking to Dan Patrick. Yeah. You're on a Zoom call with Dan Patrick. Yeah. I loved watching him growing up. He was one of the best sportscasters I ever had. I said, yeah, well, he's giving me feedback on stuff. He said, well, you better listen because he's the best. Right. So I don't think people at Full Sail realize how spoiled you are because those opportunities don't really happen once you get out into this. I have my news director. He'll tell me every once in a while, hey, that was a good story. I like that. And that's the end of it. Right. That's it. That's all I'm getting. So take advantage now. All you Full Sail guys that are listening to me right now, take advantage because nobody's got it better, I promise you, than you guys do when it comes to feedback and the knowledge that you get from those feedback sessions.
Well, that's why his name is on the shirt, right? And that's why his name is on the school. So it's great. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity for all of us to get to learn from Dan and interact with him. And, he'll push us to be our best. And that's what we all need to get better. Not just you as students, us as instructors too. I want to get deeper into all of your experiences as a student and career in just a moment, but I do want to bring up what you brought up, your career before Full Sail. While you were coaching part-time, you were working full-time other places, UPS, you mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
What was that period of your life like going through as you were working a job that was you're doing just fine there, but it wasn't necessarily your passion?
Yeah. So I had actually, when I first got out of college and I was part-time coaching, I was like, oh, maybe I want to do this full time. And so I started working part-time at Boot Barn. And um, I still own 13, 14 pairs of cowboy boots. I love cowboy boots and hats. And I learned how to shape hats. And everything I try to do, I try to be the best at, right? And so I worked my butt off and I tried to move up there and I was like, oh, hey, if I part-time coach and I do this and I could be the manager of the store and that guy makes pretty good money and blah blah blah, but it ended up not working out. Couldn't figure a way to a promotion. Don't ask me how I didn't, but I didn't, right? And maybe there was something that they saw that I didn't and I was blinded by it, but either way, I finally made the decision, okay, I can't continue to be a part-time employee here. I've got to go somewhere else. And I just happened, somebody that else was working there that was part-time employee happened to be working part-time at UPS. And I said, I'd like to go, he said, oh, we work out at the airport close to here. I work on the airplanes. I don't just push packages. I'm a supervisor there. And I could get you in as a supervisor also. You don't have to, you wouldn't be pushing packages. You'd be in charge of a crew and you guys would load planes. And I love planes. That's another thing that sports, airplanes. I love airplanes. And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool to like work around airplanes and stuff. So I, long story short, got the job and started managing a crew of about 10 people. And on a daily basis, I would be in charge of loading an aircraft. And there's a lot of rules and regulations and things that you have to know when it comes to loading aircraft because there's TSA and FAA and all this other stuff, plus the rules of the company and then the union rules. So you got to be able to work around all that stuff, and you have to know a lot. They constantly are auditing you because you're working around $50+ million pieces of machinery. Some of those planes are as much as $350 million. Like and not only that, but you're shipping 2-day, next day packages, and those things are a lot. I don't know if anybody's ever shipped a next day package, but it's not cheap. So now think about 200,000 of those going out, over the middle of the night, and if you hurt something or you crush something or you do whatever, that's a lot of money that you're costing the company. And if planes are late, you're costing the company money. It's $6,000 a minute for every minute that you're late on those planes, and who's footing that bill, right? So you learn pretty quick about deadlines and being on time, and and when you weren't on time, those meetings were not fun to be on. It was not fun to be in that meeting with your superiors, and they would chew you out, and it was, yeah, that was rough. That's where I really learned about deadlines, and that's where it's serving me well now, because I don't get nervous at deadlines anymore. It's, I got to have this on the show by 10 o'clock. There isn't a single moment where I don't believe that I'm going to be out there for the sports tees before we go to break and have all my stuff in, because I learned how to handle that pressure working for UPS. I also learned to manage people, which I pulled from coaching as well, but I learned to manage people. But I was a part-time supervisor there for about a year, and then I got promoted pretty quickly to a full-time supervisor, and I made more money, which was great. But now I'm in charge of even more people, and I'm kind of getting away from the place that I enjoyed being, which was kind of in the thick of it, being the person loading the planes and doing that. Now I'm overseeing the supervisors that are in charge of loading the planes, and now I have to plan out their day, right? Whereas before it was someone was telling me this is what your day is, and I said okay, and I do it. Now I'm planning out people's days, so I have to be the planner for everybody. And then I got into the mix of doing management, the next level up, the manager level, and that's where now you're in charge of your full-time supervisors and you're in charge, and it trickles down, but you're getting further away from the thing that you love doing. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm getting into a place where I'm not enjoying this as much. I'm basically a glorified babysitter, right? And now I'm sitting in this office working on computers. I don't get to talk to my people every day. I don't get to spend time with them and get to know them, right? And one of the things that, and I remember, my old crew thought, man, we wish we had guys like you out here still on the crews, and that we get to know people well and we get to treat, and just, it's not the same, blah, blah, blah. And also the area that I was working in, it was growing. It went from, 6 crews to 15 crews, right? So now there's more people and now there's more stuff going on. And I just got to the point where I was like, this just isn't as fun as it was when I first started. And it's because I'm getting away from the part that made it fun for me. And that was, again, coupled with, I was doing other things that I thought were fun, like PA, like doing play-by-play. And then I'd started doing the sportscasting stuff. And at the time I was like, well, this is just, I'm going back to school for this for networking purposes, right? I could do this no problem. And that's where, when I get into school, I was like, oh wow, this isn't just something I can walk in and I'm just going to be good at. Like, it is going to take a lot of work. But luckily I understood how to work, and I understood how to grind and do that kind of stuff and get my butt into gear. And so I did. But yeah, that's kind of just, sometimes you get into a job and you love what you're doing at that moment, but as you move up, which you naturally would want to do, you just get further away from the thing that you enjoy. And that's what happened to me. I didn't enjoy that aspect of it anymore. And I was like, man, if I have to do this for the rest of my life, I'm going to go nuts. I can't do this. And that was also what kind of pushed me to get into this.
Well, eventually you started meeting the deadlines for us, in addition to the deadlines at work. What was your experience like as a student in our program?
As an online student, it was tough. And I will tell you that if I had done the program when I got out of high school, if I'd have done it right away, I'm not sure that I probably would have been more living at home and helping my parents. I wouldn't have been working a full-time job. But trying to juggle this and a full-time job was a lot. And then being online can be tough too, because you're really far away from you guys, right? The only interaction I get is by Zoom meeting, when I get on my Zoom meetings and I get to do that stuff. So that was really difficult as well, trying to do that. And there were times where I was like, man, what am I doing? Right. But I would always grind through it. One of the things that I had to make choices too, right? A lot of my friends are like, oh, I'm not seeing you as much anymore. Well, yeah, because I work full time during the week and I'm trying to get those Wednesday, the Wednesday board stuff up, the web post stuff, trying to get that up. And then I always knew that Sunday was going to be that weekly, whatever that project was, which meant that I probably was going to be working on it Saturday and Sunday. If I wanted to put together a good, whatever it was that I was required to, it was going to take Saturday and Sunday. And that meant that I don't get to go out Saturday or Sunday. Or if I was going to do it, it's okay. Well, do I go out Friday night and then all say Saturday I'm doing, and whatever the case, you still have to have some time for yourself, and you still have to be able to balance that. But when you got the deadlines and you got to get stuff in, and if you want to continue to move on and do well, you've got to put in that time. And so it was tough. It was during COVID, it wasn't as tough because, work was, you go to and from, and there's nothing else you can do. But after COVID lightened up, and as I was finishing up and basically all the COVID restrictions were going away, that's when it started to get really tough, and I was missing my friends a little bit, and I would still find time to do stuff with them, but it was tough. And there was a time, in fact, there was one week during a class where I had to go out to Louisville for training, and I still had class, right? So I'm not even at home. I don't have all I had to pack my camera, my microphones, all my stuff to take it with me, because that was It wasn't a sportscasting class, but it was one of the classes where we were learning how to use the camera, learning how to shoot stuff. And so I had to take all this stuff with me to Louisville. And between training sessions, we had to do things. Now, luckily, one of the days it ended up working out. One of the days while we were in Kentucky, because they liked for us to get out and do fun things in Louisville, I went to Churchill Downs. And so I
Wow.
got to shoot some footage at Churchill Downs, which was pretty cool. I called ahead and was like, "Hey, do you mind if I bring a camera?" And they're like, "Oh yeah,
Wow.
photography's fine." So I got to make like a cool little video, something unique, something different. And it was at Churchill. Nothing great. Now I look back at it, I'm like, "Oh, that was terrible." But the point was, is like you figure out a way to make it work, and that doing it online boded well for me now, because that's what you have to do. You got to figure out how to make it work. And you are very much on your own now that you're out here. So I'm not saying that doing it online's better, because I think certainly I would have rather still had the studio available to me, right? I would have spent all my time in the studio. If I was going to school in Florida, I would have been there every single day, every hour that I could, because I would have loved that. But you figure out ways to make it work. And two, and you can back me on this, because you'll know that I didn't have backgrounds like this. I always had something behind me, because I had a green screen. I went out to the Amazon. I found a cheap green screen that I could put up, and that would take extra time when I was editing, but I loved doing it because I wanted to make it look authentic. And I went out and bought a teleprompter. I've got it here somewhere. It's sitting underneath one of these tables. I bought a teleprompter that I could put the camera in, so I could practice doing stuff with the teleprompter, even though it wasn't live and I was recording it. And but that's what I did. My entire home had these lights all over the place and things hanging from the ceiling and whatever. My living room was a disaster, but I did it all so that I could look professional. I bought again, Amazon lav mic so that I could talk through the mic, and it would hook into the camera, and I'd have to hide it so that you couldn't see it in the frame, so that I could stand there and be like I'm standing up in a studio and pretend, right, and all that stuff. And that's, yeah, again, here I am going off on a tangent, but that was kind of what those things, where it got me to.
Well, you talked about kind of there were some positives and negatives to being an online student. One of the positives is, and campus students do this too, but it's a real opportunity for you get involved in the industry for real, is the NFL runner position. And you did that. What was that experience like for you as you were working these NFL games?
That was some of the coolest stuff that I got to do, and I was so lucky that I got to do it. I did it 3 times, and more than anything, it was motivation, right? You get out there and you're actually in it, right? And I was lucky enough to each time I went, I did a little something different. The first time I was up in the booth, it was funny. We were working with Mark Sanchez, and he remembered me from high school.
How about that?
And Kevin Kugler were the two up in the booth. He
Wow.
saw me, and he goes, "Dude, what's up? You still coaching stuff?" And like it was a crack up, because we've seen each other from time to time. So you laugh about stuff like that. Even as long as that, because he's a great guy. But anyway, I got to spend time up in the booth, and I got to watch how the play-by-play works from the booth perspective, and realize really how much goes into it, right? And what they're all doing to make a broadcast go. And that was just the coolest thing ever. And I will tell you, Fox is top notch. A lot of those folks in the booth, they don't really need a whole lot. Like when I was running, it was like maybe somebody forgot something downstairs, right? Or maybe someone needed some paper, or Mark Sanchez needed a Red Bull, and they had him, down in the whatever. So that was basically the extent of it. Everything else they were pretty much on top of. But um, it was really cool to see that. The second time, I was working more down on the field level area, so I got to be on the field during the game, which was really cool. Because not a lot of people in the NFL is very locked down when it comes to people being on the field. Um, and they will not hesitate. They will shoot first, ask questions later, is kind of their motto in terms of security. So There's not a lot of people allowed down there, and I got to be on the field during the game for a little bit. But then also I got to spend time in the truck when I wasn't running around getting water for the camera people and stuff. I'd sit in the truck and got to put the headset on and just listen to the direction and to the producer and listen to the replay guys and everybody doing everything in the booth and just what all went into it. And you start to realize like how much work a lot of this stuff is, and how many people put a lot into these things to make them as seamless as possible. And you start to realize this is what top-notch professional looks like. And this is what I have to do if I want to reach that. Right. And when you see those guys working as professionals, the play-by-play guys and stuff, and you see what their level of professionalism is, that gives you an idea of what you need to be too. The second time I got to meet Adam Amin, who I believe he's still the Chicago Bulls play-by. He might not be anymore, but he was at the time doing Chicago Bulls. And both him and Kugler were awesome. I talked to them, and they were both willing to talk to me for 10 minutes. I just asked them a couple questions about how they got into it and how they did stuff, and they were awesome. And both after the game, hey, good luck on your career and stuff like that. It's great that you're doing all this stuff. The last one I got to work with the A broadcast team. I got to work with Burkhart and Olson, which was an absolute treat. And they pull out all the stops. You got Aaron Andrews and Tom Rinaldi, and you got Mike Perea was there because he was doing it at the time for the refs. And there's all these people, and it's just like, whoa, like this is the big time. And one of the things you're trying to do is you're trying to be professional at the same time, right? And so you don't ask for pictures, you don't ask for autographs, you don't ask for stuff like that, right? You have a job to do, and your job is to do your job. And that goes a long way, because I was running around doing whatever was asked of me that anybody needed. I introduced myself to everybody when they came in. Hi, Kevin, I'm Charlie Yaeger. I'm the runner up here in the booth. If you ever need anything, just let me know. Hey, Greg, I'm the runner up in the booth. If you need anything, just let me know. Hey, and that went for the stats guys. That went for the spotters. And what happened is I started just kind of shooting the breeze with Kevin Burkhart's spotter. We were talking about he had gone to Chapman, which is one of the colleges in the same league as Redlands in Southern California. And we got to just talking about stuff. And I was saying, yeah, I want to be a sportscaster. That's how I got this. As a friend recommended me, blah, blah, blah. And so now I'm here. And he goes, hey, Kev, come over here. Hey, this guy wants to be a sportscaster, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, you do? He goes, oh, that's really cool. Hey, after the game, let's swap phone numbers. We'll connect sometime. Right. And that's just from being respectful and talking and showing that I wanted to work hard in those opportunities. And after the game, I wasn't going to go up and be like, hey, remember that thing you said about phone numbers? Like, I just didn't say anything. And he remembered after the game. He said, hey, Charlie, come over here. He goes, what's your number? We'll swap stuff. And he goes, it's the middle of the World Series right now. So like, don't call me, call me in 2 weeks. He goes, we'll figure out something 2 weeks, but I'm busy right now. But he said, I know you're coming up on I said, yeah, I'm coming up on graduation stuff. And I'd love to know about getting that first job. And he did. He took 15 minutes out of his day to get on a phone call with me, and we chatted about stuff. And one of the things he said was, he goes, I don't do it with everybody, but I was really impressed with your work ethic and all that stuff and professionalism and things. And that meant a lot to me, not because it's like, oh, somebody's like, if you do it for people to recognize that you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you need to do it because it's the right thing to do. And it was cool to see him recognize it. And it just reinforces the fact that when you are professional, that when you do those things right, there are people that recognize it, and then there's people that are willing to help you. And even a guy that is at the top of his game, the very top of his game. And I didn't realize this at the time, but he had a similar journey that I did. He didn't get into the sportscasting game until later, and he had to grind it out, and he worked incredibly hard to get where he's at. And maybe he saw another guy that's doing the same thing and just, wanted to help him out. And it was just really cool. And also in my head, it said, hey, if you're ever in that position, help somebody out.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And
You gotta be able to help people out. Yeah.
just like him, you're now living the dream yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So
There it is, living the
what's
dream.
that like?
And now, your local sports with Charlie Yaeger.
It's amazing. I'll tell you. Leaving UPS, I took a pay cut. I took a really big pay cut. And I will tell you that no amount of money would, at least from a common man's perspective, right? No amount of money is that I look at was worth me continuing to do that and not chase after this. And it was, at first, I remember when I told my dad I was going to leave, because he was a 9 to 5er. He worked for Toyota and had a great job, and it took care of the family growing up, and he had a fantastic job, and he worked his way up through that company and did very good things, and that was what he was used to, right? This is something very different. This isn't the same as going and getting a job somewhere and you just work your way up through the ladder. You're going to go somewhere, and then you got to go somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then somewhere else. That's typically how it works. There's probably some places where you can work your way up a ladder, but I've found that to be untypical. And he's like, you're going to leave this job that's got benefits and this and that, and you get paid X amount, and you're going to go out to Minnesota, huh? And at first I think he wasn't. Now, when he sees me on television every night and he's able to watch me and he's able to see what I'm doing, and he got to go to the studio and see it. Now I think he understands a little bit differently, but he was wary of it at first. Like, why would you want to do this? But now I think he also sees how much joy I have, and not that he just wanted me to think about, he always supports me. My parents, God bless them, they support me in everything that I do. And they just want to make sure that I'm making the right decisions and not doing something, just gun ho by the seat of my pants. But I had thought a lot about it, right? As I was going through school, I thought about it for 2 years. I thought, man, am I going to get done with this? And am I going to just continue to stay in the same job? Or can I really do this? And also a lot of the support from the course directors at Full Sail, including you, when you guys say, hey, you got a legitimate shot at doing this, you could really do this, you could be good at this. I took that to heart, because I know you guys have lived it too. You guys have all lived that dream, and you wouldn't be saying it or blowing smoke if you didn't mean it. At least I hoped.
No.
So now we, I get out and I get to do this, and it was daunting at first. I will not lie. That first week you get in and you're like, all right, go find some stories. And I go, well, where am I going to find stories? Right. But after a while, you kind of get used to it. You go out and you start talking to people, and you start hearing things. And yeah, are some of the first stories that you do great? No. Right. You're still, we put together how many packages when we were in school? Probably 3 or 4. And now I'm putting together a package a day, right? I'm doing a package a day, a couple VOSOTs a day. I'm doing a VOSOT and a highlight. And so now there's more on your plate, and you have to go find these things. They're not, hey, here's a topic, go take it. You got to do it yourself. And so you really learn by fire. But if you are organized, if you work to get ahead, if you utilize all those skills, and I leaned on skills that I learned in coaching and working at UPS and other things. If you utilize those skills, you'll do well. And we've had people since I've been here that have come in that have not done well, and they don't utilize those skills, and you have to try to teach them those things. But I will tell you, every single day I get up, I'm grateful for this job. And there's things that I do constantly on a daily basis that I just smile and think, man, I could be doing something, way worse.
Yeah.
Even this last weekend, I was covering girls hockey down at the state tournament. One of the teams from around here won their 3rd straight state title. And from where I live to downtown St. Paul is 3.5 hours. So I had to drive 3.5 hours,
Wow.
not to shoot the game because I couldn't shoot the game because they have a TV contract, just to get the sound for after the game. And then on Sunday after the game, because we don't broadcast over the weekend, on Sunday, I drove 2.5 hours from here because I drove out and back on Saturday. And then Sunday drove up to Warroad, where TJ Oshie is from Warroad.
Oh,
That's the big guy from their Hockey Town, USA. And that's where TJ Oshie went to school. And they got a lot of other gold medalists and stuff from hockey teams. But 2.5 hours up to that town. And I went 2 hours early before they got back because they had a big old celebration where the fire trucks and everybody escorted them into town. And there were all these people at the arena because they couldn't make it the 6 hours down to St. Paul from Warroad, and talked to more of the people and was there for, 30 minutes and then drove 2.5 hours back here. I was in the car for, 10, 11, 12 hours over the weekend, gave up my entire weekend that I am not required to do, but I did it anyway because I love that stuff. I got to go to the Xcel Energy Center and sit in the press box and watch a hockey game. Doesn't matter that it wasn't the Wild. It was for something great for one of the towns that I cover. And the people there want to see that stuff because they love their hockey. And I want to provide that coverage for them. And I got to, by going and getting the sound myself, which there's no other way to get it other than to go down to the Xcel Energy Center and be there with my camera and get the conference afterwards. I was able to get 3 of the girls there plus the coach. And then when I went back up to World, I was able to get 3 of the other girls and get interviews from them. So now I got 6 girls from the team that get to be on the news and get to be recognized for their accomplishment. And that's the part that I absolutely love about it is that we got to provide that coverage for them that nobody else is going to do because they're so far away from everything else. Like nobody else is doing that.
Oh, it's amazing. And it's really cool that you've had the experiences you've had there already. And we're up against the clock here, but I do want to ask you a couple more questions. And one of them is, you've had the rare opportunity to work with multiple Full Sail graduates there. I think we've had 6 people come through your stations. How has it felt to establish that pipeline at your station from our program?
It's been really cool. Every time that we get a guy and part of it too is that, Chris Burns came before me, right? There's other guys that helped pave the path. You got Chris Burns, and you had Ryan Bowler and Hanky Hazelton. And then I showed up, and since then we brought in Sammy Holiday and Matthew Freeman, who actually graduated before I did, but Matthew is here now after a 2-year hiatus, and he's absolutely killing it. And I got to so in the last 5 broadcasts, 4 of them I've got to spend on the desk with Matthew, which is great. And it's so good having those guys around because they lift up the broadcast team. I'm going to tell you right now, we know as Full Sail graduates so much. We learn so much, and we've already practiced a lot of the things that a lot of other people don't, and have skill sets that a lot of other people don't have when they come in. Whether because they're not doing those things in school, they're not getting the reps at them, or they're just not being taught it the same way. Sammy walked in and was ready right away, right? Matthew walked in, and within a month, he's anchoring the desk up here in Bemidji. He's getting that opportunity, and our boss trusts him to produce a show, a half-hour news segment, produce a show, and go running with it. Within a month and a half of me being here, I was up training on the sports desk to take, because I started as a reporter, not as the sports director, to train on the sports desk so that my boss at the time could take time off, or if he got sick or whatever, and they could trust that I could do the desk. And 6 months later, that turned into me taking over as the sports director. And that was just because we are so ready coming out of school right away. And that's why Dennis keeps going back to Full Sail and picking guys out, because he likes the fact that he doesn't have to do a lot of training with people. He gets guys that are going to be able to hit the ground running, and right away you just gotta, you got to learn, the new thing, the things that you would have to, how to do the rundowns, how we do stuff at that studio, how we shoot things, how to input stuff, all that. But otherwise it's, ready to go right now. And it's so much fun to have other Full Sail guys there, because we all shared in that same experience, and to know that we're being successful, and that's a networking thing too.
Yeah.
I got a call on Saturday because it had to do with the girls hockey, from one of our gentlemen over at WDAY. It was Sherwin. He called me.
Ah,
Like,
how about that?
he goes, "Hey," he goes,
Sherwin
"I didn't
Shelton.
realize." He goes, "I didn't realize that you were a Dan Patrick guy."
How about that?
And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh," he goes, "when I called you on your phone, it popped up and I see the Dan Patrick thing." He goes, "I had no
That's
idea." He goes,
funny.
and we'd been emailing and
Wow.
texting stuff back and forth when we need different shit, because that's our exclusive with the Fargo area. And so it was just funny that, it ended up being that. And now we've, saved each other's numbers, and we've connected, and I still talk to Chris Burns, and he's down doing his thing down
Kirksville.
in Missouri. And I know that he also has a Full Sail guy with him as well. And
He's got
it's just really,
multiple. Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool to see everybody being so successful. And it also, again, it's that networking thing, right?
Yeah.
I know a guy that's working here, I know this guy, or I know that guy. And I don't know, I enjoy it. I
Well, that's
really,
great. And that leads to the final big question. What are your future dreams within the industry?
my goal has always been to get myself to play by play. One of the things that I've learned since I got out here, one of the things I learned since starting, is that very rarely is play by play a full-time gig. It's just not. It's not like you think. I mean, you could look at the guys like Vin Scully, who, yeah, it was full-time for him, right? But that was a guy that did it for years and years and years. Most guys don't. In fact, we talked to that gentleman the other day, and you do multiple different things for Milwaukee, the
Yep.
Brewers, and for Boston College, and you're just doing all kinds of different stuff. And out here in the Midwest, it's not so much in California, but in the Midwest, there's a lot of people doing play by play. Everybody wants to do play by play. And for me, I want to get to play by play, but I believe that working through that sportscaster, that path, that separates me from a lot of people. Being able to do stuff in front of the camera, on air, on a deadline, it's different. And I don't want to say it's more difficult, but it's difficult in its own way. And that's what I'm going to continue doing. I'm going to look for jobs like that, and there's a lot of jobs out there that have that, but also have play-by-play opportunities, because those
Yeah. That
channels,
happened for me.
yeah, they
Jeff
air.
Radcliffe too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Radcliffe was doing the not Miami,
Orlando City.
Orlando City stuff. And so I'm looking for things that I can get both at those places, and get to do both of those. And so that's really kind of what my next step is. And luckily, even though my contract is up in June, I know, my news director's already said you're welcome to stay as long as you want, right? He'd love for me to stay for 3 years like the guy before me did. But I could be a little more choosy. But that also comes from the hard work that I put in, that they would want to keep me here.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're doing it. I mean, like,
Mhm.
if you keep doing the things you're doing and stay on the path you are on, I have no doubt you can accomplish all of those goals and beyond, Charlie. You've made us super proud. Let's end with what I like to call the dream sequence. Quick answers for some questions that I think you might have a little fun with. You were talking about your PA announcer gig and
Mhm.
talking about walk-up songs. What would be your dream walk-up song for yourself?
Oh, there's no question. It'd be Thunderstruck by AC/DC. I've thought about that one for a long time. That
We're gonna
Thunderstruck by
have to
AC.
have a softball tournament, an alumni softball tournament, and
Oh, that'd be
we
great.
will make that dream come true for you, Charlie. Okay. Dream NFL coach to work under as an assistant coach.
Oh, Dan Campbell.
Oh
No doubt.
man, that would be
I would
fun.
love, that would be so much fun to work under Dan Campbell. I know there's a lot of really good coaches out there, but he's a player's coach in the true sense that he was a player. That's awesome. Yeah, Dan Campbell for sure.
All right, and last one, dream actor to play you in the story of Charlie Yaeger the Fourth.
Oh, I don't know the guy's name, but everybody always said that I look like him. I don't know if you remember the Beer Fest guy. They
Oh
call
yeah,
him Film Beer Fest. Yeah,
yeah.
that guy. I think he'd do a great job because he's a funny dude, and yeah. So
I
yeah.
met Jay, I can't pronounce his last name, at a comedy show, the guy who wrote that, and he was like the main beer pong player. So, well, good answers there. Any final advice you want to leave our watchers and listeners with?
Yep, just you got to grind, you got to work hard every day, and if you put in the work, it's going to take more than what you think, but if you put in that extra work, you will get noticed. And always be ready. By putting in that work, you're always going to be ready for that opportunity, right? Always make sure that whatever that you're putting out in terms of the video that day or whatever, believe that your next employer is watching it, because they might be. And make sure that whatever work that you're putting in, and that the work that you put in that day, and that the video that you produce or whatever it is, that you would be willing to send that to your next employer to show on your demo reel. That's the only way to get better. You have to push yourself like that, and it'll make you ready for any opportunity that's out there, because you never know when it's going to happen.
That's Charlie Yaeger. He is on the path to reaching even more dreams, and he is off to a great start. I want to thank Charlie for being with us. Everyone else, keep on living your dream.